Swaggett, we are ready to begin. They need to be addressed by name. Good evening. I would like to call to order the October 2nd, 2023 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Let the record reflect that all board members are present and Director Bleasner is joining us online. Our student representatives this evening are Shira and Ella. The board values public participation and engagement in the meetings of the board. Board meetings will continue to be live streamed on the Lake Washington School District website and are available for viewing following the conclusion of the meeting. The public are always welcome to email any individual board member at boardmembers@lwsd.org. Before we begin, I would just want to ask all of our board members, we've been hearing that there's been some difficulty picking up the audio during our board meetings, so when you speak, please speak clearly and into as close to the mic as possible. Thank you. Our land acknowledgement will be read by Director Guthrie.
The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District acknowledges that our district is on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples, who have reserved treaty rights on this land, including the Duwamish and the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived here since time immemorial. We commit to continue collaborating with our Native community to teach the indigenous history of this land and these local tribes to all children of the district. We also commit to provide the best possible education for all children of Native descent who attend our schools.
Thank you, Director Guthrie. I will now entertain a motion to approve the October 2nd, 2023 agenda.
So moved.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Guthrie to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. The next item on our agenda is public comment. The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District welcomes the public to the business meetings of the board and encourages community engagement. The board dedicates 30 minutes to hear from the public during the public comment period of the meeting. Participants should not expect a response from the board at the end of their comments, as we dedicate this time to listening to your voice and would like to get as many members of the public an opportunity to speak as the time allows. As for this evening, we do not have anybody who has signed up for public comment, nor do we have any written public comment. So we will move on to the next item of our agenda. Next, we have approval of the October 2nd, 2023 consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Guthrie. Dr. Holman, will you please poll the board?
Yes, I will. Director Guthrie?
Yes.
Director Stewart?
Yes.
Director Bleasner?
Yes.
Vice President LaLiberty?
Yes.
And President Choi?
Yes. Motion carries. Dr. Holman, will you please summarize the donations this evening?
Absolutely. Tonight in the board's packet, you have over $70,000 in donations coming into our schools. This evening, PTSA donating over $63,000 and private sources providing over $6,000 in donations to our schools to support programs and services for kids.
Thank you very much. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is redirecting 2022 construction levy proceeds and matching funds. Dr. Holman.
Yes, and so at our September 11th study session, we brought to the board the concept of repurposing some of our 2022 construction levy dollars for in addition to one of our current projects. And so tonight, Associate Superintendent Barbara Posthumus is here to provide the formal recommendation. Tonight, you're hearing that recommendation, and then formal action will be on the board's agenda at the next board meeting. Associate Superintendent Posthumus.
Thank you.
How's that? All right, thank you. Okay, so tonight's presentation is a repurposed recommendation relating to our 2022 construction levy. We have shared this information with the board previously, and so I'm going to walk through kind of the presentation and the next steps relating to this. The 2022 construction levy is part of our Building Excellence Plan. So these are the projects in our 22 construction levy, and we are focusing tonight on our additional high school capacity on the east side. The other term we use for that is that's located on Site 59 in Sammamish. So as a reminder, these are the projects that the 2022 construction levy funded the following. They funded additional elementary capacity in the Redmond area, and we repurposed those funds in April to rebuild and enlarge Rockwell, also in Redmond. The levy also provides funds for additions at our 3 middle schools, and then provides additional capacity both on the east side in Sammamish and then on the west side in Kirkland.
Barbara,
Yes.
could you click the share button on the Teams in front of you and then just share the presentation to make sure that Director Bleasner is also able to participate?
Okay.
Yeah, it's about 20 seconds delayed. Yeah.
Let me. I'm going to have to.
It's okay.
Do you know
Just for the next presentation, we'll do that.
Okay.
It's okay. Because she can follow along with the presentation because it's online.
It is saved.
But as she's participating, we want to make sure that it's.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, and then so again, just another explanation of what the construction levy provided. So moving on to specifically to our additional high school capacity on the east side, our capital projects team has been working since the levy passed to design this project. Architects and contractors have been selected. They are working closely with the city of Sammamish throughout to obtain throughout the permitting process. UZDP is called Unified Zone Development Plan. It's a project within the city's town center zone. So there's a specific process that they are going through. The city held an open house on the project last week as part of their permit process. So again, they're in design development, and the planned occupancy for this project is fall of 2025. This is a rendering on the left. I'll start with on the right. That's an overview of the actual site. It's located in Sammamish. The building that is being planned is a 3-story building with capacity for 600 students. On the left is the complete site, and the specific building that is being built is located kind of where the red arrow is pointing to. The site is also being master planned for the future. We want to maximize all of our property to the best of our ability, and so we're building the purpose of the building construction is to provide a flexible design. And the reason for that is we want to make sure the educational space is being designed for multiple uses so that it can then flex in the future. The site is also being planned to house future additions, additional buildings, etc. So you can see on the right the additional the darker shaded areas are the additional buildings that are being planned. So this is a rendering of what the new facility will look like. This is a view of the building from the southeast. 3-story building. And then the design work, the original design for the high school was based on our Tesla STEM High School. That project does not include a gymnasium, and we know now that that school is open that lack of a gym does create programmatic and logistical challenges. And so we want to ensure that the final facility will support the instructional needs of future students. So the design team did design a gymnasium alternative for this project. And that's that building right there where the red arrow is pointing to. So this is a picture of the gymnasium facility. It's a view of the rear of the building. The first picture you saw was the front of the building. This is the rear, and the gymnasium would be on the left. And so what we are bringing to you is a recommendation to repurpose levy funds to provide a gymnasium with the high school project on Site 59. I won't read all of the rationale for the recommendation, but we did share that in a brief with the board last week. Really, the rationale for the recommendation is to provide our students with access to physical education, essential to our standards and curriculum, provides maximum flexibility as we continue to future plan for the site, allows this entire student body to gather in a single space for positive events such as assemblies, allows for events that create community such as dances. It's a valuable community resource to the city of Sammamish and the Sammamish community, reduces future cost escalations by building it now, and it can and would be completed at the same timeline as the rest of the school. So I wanted to provide you with a financial update on the 2022 construction levy. A reminder, the levy provided $295 million in funds. We have also, since that time, collected over $16 million in impact fees, which provides a total of $311 million for capital projects. We've currently allocated $306.2 million to projects, which does include the dollars that we rarely set aside for contingency and construction escalation. So there's a lot of numbers on this slide, but what I want to focus your attention on is the recommendation is to allocate, so that first red box, the recommendation is to allocate $22.4 million to the gymnasium project, and those dollars are being moved from the program contingency and construction escalation. That's the second red box. With those project dollars being moved, there remains still $32 million in the contingency program. So the total commitment does not change. It remains at $306.2 million. And again, it's important to note as well, just above that first red box, the total commitment, it's important to note as well that the main building project for the high school capacity on the east side was lower than our planned contingency. So that project is coming in lower than expected. So some of the other we're still in preliminary design for Rockwell, so those final estimates are to be determined. So I wanted to share, this is a slide that you have seen before. These are the remaining funds from our bond and levy projects that can be used to support all of our capital projects, planning, and property. We have used some of these funds for property purchases and supporting additional construction and pre-design work. Bottom line, there's a total of $14 million balance here. And again, this can also provide contingency in with our we are still in a hyper construction inflation period. So we are also, there could be additional revenues, and that we are looking, there's a possibility for state construction assistance for our Rockwell Rebuild and Enlarge project. So we'll continue to update these numbers as we go on. So the recommendation timeline tonight, I'm providing the presentation on the formal recommendation. The resolution has been shared. It is in the board docs, board materials. After tonight, we will do, our communications department will do a press release, and we will message community and staff and provide them information on how they can provide feedback via board comment, and they could do that in writing or in person at the next board meeting. At the October 23rd board meeting, again, public comment will be available to the community, and the board will take formal action on the recommendation. And once that formal action is taken, then support services will move forward with implementing the recommendation. So that, and this is the same timeline process that we used with the Rockwell repurpose that we did in March and April. That is the end of my presentation. Any questions?
No, I don't believe so. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that will come back at our next board meeting. Oh. Director Bleasner, did you have a question?
I do. And so my question is, on October 23rd, it's mentioned that public comment available for community. Will that be done during the public comment timeframe, or will that be held as a public hearing?
It's during the public comment timeframe.
Okay, so just slightly different than how we did it the last time.
Nope, that's how we did it the last time with Rockwell as well. It was, go ahead, John.
We look back at that meeting. It was a special meeting, and so we typically with a special board meeting, we don't have public comment because it's a very selective set of topics. We added public comment to a special meeting as opposed to having a public hearing. And so it seemed like it was different than typical because it was a special meeting. And so when we message community, we'll share with them the two ways to communicate with the board around this. One, written information to the board, or they can sign up for public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director Guthrie.
Yeah, just to be clear, is the total cost of the project $22.4 million? And I'm looking at the slide that's got the financial update slide that's got everything broken down with the red boxes. Is it the total cost is $22.4 million? You're moving $22.4 million from the program contingency, and there was already some stuff previously that had utilized those funds. Is that? I'm trying to understand the difference between the $22.4 million on the one line and the $49.8 on the other.
Correct. So we had set aside for whenever we do a levy or a bond project, we set aside contingency for unexpected events and then construction escalation, given the fact that the inflation for construction right now is really variable and unknown. So we set aside those dollars. So what we are doing is, so we had, prior to this, we had, almost $54 million balance in that contingency. So what that is it's reducing the contingency by $22.4 million and increasing the, and moving it toward the gym project, the gymnasium project. Yes, Mark.
As I recall, this site has two options of purpose, if you will. One is a specialty school, if you will, choice school. And second, with the idea of having the ninth grade from EHS be down there. Am I correct?
So right now we're going through the process of determining what the educational program will be, because there's multiple interests at Site 59. One is to reduce capacity on the east side because Eastlake, being our largest high school, has significant capacity concerns right now. Redmond High School is also, while not as large, has similar capacity challenges that Eastlake does. And so we're going through community engagement right now, both with students from Redmond and Eastlake through survey, but also in person, also doing community engagement with families, including affinity spaces for Hispanic, Latino, Black African American families, to really unpack what are some of the, I'll just say, benefits and challenges of a ninth grade campus, benefits and challenges of a choice school, because neither check all of the boxes for how that addresses capacity. And so, and then also looking at updated enrollment projections will be another component of that. And so there's a number of factors that will play into the final decision, knowing that either way we go, it won't meet all of the interests of everybody involved.
The reason why I asked, I wanted to double check, because I also wanted to find out, we're basically looking at the same structure. However, from a parking perspective and a traffic perspective, it would seem like we'd be having different patterns, if you will, and different needs. And I wonder, and I hope we're looking at being able to vary that site's capabilities based on that. Given the fact that Sahalee is a mess already, and getting people up and down Sahalee is a joy, not enjoyed by anyone.
So right now, the campus is planned not to include student parking, which would mean the default really is a ninth grade campus. If we do choose to go the route of a 9-12 choice school, the team has plans in place that they would work with the city of Sammamish to get permitted student parking as well on that site.
I guess my concern is the busing. And I hope that as we're looking at busing and we're looking at the idea that, one, we always have a shortage of buses and we have a shortage of drivers, that we start now talking to the regional transit people to see what they can do with that one route that goes up and down Sahalee.
Director La Liberty.
I wasn't going to ask a question, but then you gave me time and I had one. The TBD for additional high school capacity west side, now that we're a little further along in the thinking on that, do you have a sense of when you will have a better idea of what any use of contingency or escalation costs for that project?
So they will begin the design process on that probably, early spring, and it takes about 6 months to kind of get closer to cost estimate. I will talk to Brian Buck and kind of get a closer estimate on timeline and
Okay, so we're
and let
still,
you know, but-
we're still, all right, got it.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. That's helpful. We're still 9 months to a year out from having that.
for final estimated costs.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda this evening is the Equity and Family Engagement Program update. Dr. Holman?
Your teams, yeah. And so I'd like to welcome Pablo Ortega, our Director of Equity and Family Engagement. We got to meet with him and his team this morning, and so we had a preview and actually started the day off with a bit of inspiration. I think you'll enjoy the team and what they're sharing. And so as we think about tonight, we're also monitoring OE14. And our Equity and Family Engagement Department, they carry a heavy load for the district, but they're not the only group that should be doing equity work across the district. But they definitely lead the way, and they're doing some really great work. And so they're here tonight to share about a couple of the programs and services that they offer and provide. Pablo.
Hello. Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Holman, for those very kind words. Thank you to the board for allowing us to come and address you all tonight. As you said, my name is Pablo Ortega. I'm Director of Equity and Family Engagement for Lake Washington Schools. Along with me, I've got Dana Bakporo and Sergio Barrera. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a little bit, but before we do that, I'd like to remind the board that one of the success criteria for Operational Expectation 14.1 is that we provide a video production featuring student voice, especially students, non-dominant student voices, that is. And so we have that for you tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share that with you now, and then at that point, we'll talk a little bit more about the content that you're about to see. And let's hear directly from our students.
There are differences that make us unique and individuals. I think currently, sometimes right now, they want us all to be like united, but we lose our individuality.
Everyone's culturally different, and we can all share that together.
And people normally just look at Black History Month and then just leave it just there. They don't see how can we support the Black students after Black History Month.
Now, I really love that we have the Students of Color Conference that really brought us all together. We got to have that sense of community, and especially because it was the whole district. So we got to meet people from other schools, we got to interact, and we got to feel that sense of community and belonging, which I really appreciate.
I thought it'd be nice to learn different stuff, because like in school you learn the same like core subjects and then like some fun electives. But there you could take a small break from that, hang out with really cool people from the different schools, and learn really cool stuff you wouldn't learn usually.
I love learning about different cultures, so I think the biggest part was the connections and getting able to see, oh, what are some people doing to help this issue? For me as a student, it was really nice to see more diversity, but also I think there's a sense of when you see more people that look like you and you know how close they are, especially since this was the entire district, I loved it. It got us as a BSU to have more events that were more centered around all Black students around it, not just us, which was really fun.
The district is reaching out to kids of color and giving them information and opportunities and just trying to get their voices heard.
I took a lot of stuff from the SEMA camp. I felt pretty like, I guess not special, but like kind of like an odd one out. But everyone kind of like took me in, you know. I wasn't sure if I was going to do WANIC this year, but the SEMA camp just like basically explained to me that trying new things and like having new opportunities is like a really good thing. So I tried WANIC this year and like I'm enjoying it, and I'm like a nurse, and I'll be helping like elderly later on and like talking to new people and like meeting new people.
I helped plan the Black Debutante Ball, and I really think that it helped me as a student because it was a way for all the BSUs to come together in LWSD and just kind of have a social event where we could all get to know each other. BSU stands for Black Student Union, and it's just kind of a cultural club that meets after school that's welcome to all people.
For me, the Debutante Ball was like a symbolization of like collaboration and Black excellence and celebration at the end of the year. I really liked all the BSUs coming together because I hadn't met anybody from the other schools, so I feel this was really an opportunity to collaborate with people I hadn't really met before and really connect the Black population in the school, because it's such, like, the district is so big, and because Black students are such a minority, it's hard to feel connected with one another.
I think a lot of the time we as students think, oh, we can't do this. But then we do it and we try and we're told, oh, it's something you can try, but we don't really get past the try part. And I think if we start seeing adults and admin and people coming together to actually start doing things, that's when students start seeing more of an example of, oh, I can do something and I'm going to do it.
The support from the staff has been one of the things I think I really enjoy about Eastlake across the board, but especially in reference to Olivia's involvement in Black Student Union and the equity programs.
There's some really nice teachers that dedicate and put in the time to help their students grow as people and also as like intellectuals and academics. And I think it's kind of like the community that Lake Washington School District fosters.
I feel like there's like such a small population of us, so just being able to like put this together, work with my fellow Black Student Union, planning this out, it really, to me it's like making an impact and just being able to be a representative for students of color.
Black History Month is a very big thing in my school. We have the MLK Day Assembly that is run by the BSU. And so I think that's really an opportunity for us to go to the forefront of Black History Month and really speak our truth to a majority white population.
Of making sure that every student feels heard, but it's also making sure that every student feels safe. And I think safety is a really big concern. And I hope that soon, not just our district, but more districts that work with children and in the education and industry, that they start looking into how we can communicate healthily in a classroom.
All right. I did forget to mention that while we asked students to describe to us their experience in some of our programs that we sponsor or co-sponsor out of the district equity department, we'd also asked them if they were able to address the board, district leadership, or their school leadership. What are some of the suggestions they had regarding culturally responsive, just culturally responsiveness, and also things that they would change, adjust, that sort of thing, and to ensure they're seen as students. And so I'd like to have Adana Bakboro come on up, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the Black Debutante Ball, which you heard of in the video. Do I share the, oh, is it already shared? Okay. Slowly but surely. There you go. Adana.
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you to the board for having us. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, just for being here. My name is Adana Bakboro, like Pablo mentioned. I am one of the equity and family engagement facilitators for our district. I specifically support the East Lake Learning Community. And with that being said, I'm going to talk about the Debutante Ball. So I want to emphasize the fact that it was student-led. And Kisa Dupe, which is one of the girls that you saw in the video, and she's also on the upper left corner of the slide here. And her and I have known each other for about a couple school years now. And I known her from one of our programs that we also provide from the equity department called the Black Gems History Program, which is for Black students, K through 12, to learn more about Black history and learn about things that they may not be able to learn in school. And Kisa was one of our participants. And one day she emailed me and she said, Miss Adana, I would love to have something for our Black students, our Black Student Union members, just to have an event where we can come together and we can learn more about our history. And I'm thinking maybe we can do a debutante ball. Now, for me, I didn't know anything about a debutante ball, and so, but I love the fact that she emailed me and she took that initiative. And so I immediately replied to her. I said, yes, let's do it. I would love to help. I also am one of the East Lakes Black Student Union co-advisors. And so with that, I was like, I would love to make sure I can support in the best way. And so it took a few months. It was hard work, but with the help of the equity department, with the help of D. Smith Akins, who supports the professional learning department, families, and other students from our BSUs and all the comprehensive high schools, East Lake, Lake Washington, Juanita, and Redmond, we were able to create a beautiful event towards the later end of our last school year. And it was actually hosted right here in this room. And it was our first one, and it was amazing. And so this was a time where students can come together and they can learn about what is a debutante ball, why is it significant in the Black community, what's the history behind it. And we were able to get support from the Northwest Tap Connection. Kisa is very well connected with that organization, and we had one of her instructors come in and speak to our students. And again, this was open to all Black students, our Black Student Union members, their families, and just for a chance where they can learn about debutante balls and also be able to come together in community, have some food and have a dance, and just be able to come together as one. You know, as some of our Black students, some of our Black and brown students in particular, it can be kind of isolating knowing the fact that there's not that many of them that look like them, not that many adults that look like them either. Some of them have told me that I maybe have one other Black student in my class, or I may have one Black teacher here and there, but it's very rare. And that resonated a lot with me because that was my story too when I was growing up. I grew up in North Seattle and I had a great education. However, it was pretty rare to see someone that looked like me, whether it's a student or a teacher. I didn't have my first Black professor until I was in college. And so being able to support Kisa and the other BSU members in this was amazing and very heartwarming. And as you can see in the picture, all the smiles, the joy that exudes in this picture, I'm all about joy is resistance. And especially when the work that we do in our district, we want to make sure that our students of color, our Black students, our students with disabilities, all students from various communities can come together and be unapologetically themselves, come together as one, feel welcome and belong in our district. And so that brings me to the next point of our policy, OE 14.1, providing that welcoming and equitable environment. And so with the Debutante Ball and other programs I will mention later, we want to make sure our students feel like they can belong, they can be themselves. they can feel like there's someone that looks like me and I'm not alone. And so with the Black Debutante Ball, I just hope that it continues to grow. I hope that other Black students and other BSU members can see themselves, can feel connected with one another, and be really proud of their community and culture. And I see that happening for all our students in our district, especially our students from underserving communities, whether they're immigrants or they speak a second language or they're, have disabilities and everything in between. And so I want to make sure that we can provide spaces in our district that students don't feel alone and they truly feel belong wherever they are. So I just appreciate the board for listening in. I'm going to have my colleague Sergio Barrera speak more about other programs that we have had and provided. So.
Hey everyone, my name is Sergio Barrera. I also serve in the same position as Adana, but I serve the Redmond Learning Community. One of my favorite parts of being able to serve here in Lake Washington is that I've been allowed to be able to be creative professionally and be able to bring in programs that I got to be a student at many years ago. One of those being La Cima Bilingual Leadership Camp that is hosted through the Association of Washington State Student Leaders. So I went to La Cima when I was going into my junior year at a moment where college was not an idea that I had. I would go to school, I would try second semester because I was soccer season and I needed good grades to play, and then I would forget about first semester. But when I went to La Cima, I remember the one vivid memory that I have is that we sat around a campfire and we got split up by gender. And here's where I met Vincent Perez, who's a director, and Luis Ortega, who was a senior counselor at the time. And there we started talking about manhood. What does that mean, right? They allowed me to know that there's a different path that isn't what was meant. I didn't have to go with construction. I could seek education. And then I heard Luis Ortega talking about him being undocumented and being able to go to college and how hard the road is. However, it's possible if you just put your mind to it. I've gone back to La Cima for the past 10 years. I've been able to serve as a junior counselor, a senior counselor. I also have the opportunity to recruit junior counselors now from across the state, young Latinos that are entrepreneurs, college students that get to mentor the students at camp. And I also got to co-direct the first La Cima Bilingual Leadership Camp at the San Juan Islands. So to me, this program is important to provide the students because it is a space where they come and they get to be in community with each other. They get to share their language. We're not judging them on how much Spanish they know or how much English they know, but everything that we do and that we give them is in Spanish and English, and there's no part of any programming that we do at camp that is not in both languages. Sometimes we even share the campus with Deaf Team Leadership, and we get to learn a little bit alongside them and be able to use 3 languages. And oftentimes, even some of the students that come, their second language is Spanish. It's not even their first language. We're very rooted in experiential leadership and cultural community wealth. And you'll have students who aren't engaging in class by day 3. They're on stage singing songs. They're crafting spoken words. They're on the challenge course, guiding their councils through challenges. And that leads me to talk about also the Students of Color Conference and being able to provide spaces where students can come together and create community. So there's 3 things that we focus on in the Students of Color Conference. One is community. We stress being a bridge between the community and the students. So through the work of our community engagement committee, we always have resources that we recruit, right? So they're tabling throughout the conference. We also, thanks to the work of Naima Webb, we were able to provide 4 scholarships to students this year. Diego Gonzalez, who was on the video, I believe he received $2,000 from the foundation as well as Equity Institute, who is also one of our partners there. And they also run La Cima Bilingual Leadership Camp as well. We stress on being able to provide students with educators that look like them, right? So we stress finding local talent in King County that can come and talk to our students that our principals, teachers, business owners. That's very important to us because I often have a hard time telling students that education is the way to go when they go to their classes, when they're in their offices, right? Their staff doesn't look like them. They're not represented in their classrooms. So we want to be able to show them that there are staff of color in certain positions throughout the district, throughout various different positions within their community. And then also student knowledge, right? That is the biggest part of our conference. So at every conference for the past 2 years, we've had a student talent show where we've had students share spoken words, sing songs. We had a student who always makes us pudding every year. And for a whole, I don't know how she makes a pudding for a whole conference. There's like almost 200 people there, but everybody gets a piece of it. And then also through their knowledge, right, we also seek to grow from them, right? Our first year, we invited students in the ML program and provided no Spanish programming at all whatsoever. So they became spectators, right? They weren't participants of the conference. At the end of the conference, we provided a post-survey where it was brought to our attention that they were just sitting there, right? So the following year, which was this year, this past year, we were able to bring in 4 workshops that were in Spanish for them. And these workshops, right, the students are engaging in non-traditional, like, classroom work. Same with La Cima. They're learning about financial literacy. They're learning about identity. They're drawing themselves in portraits and then identifying what they love about themselves the most. They're engaging in talking about the history of corridos, which is a very big culture in Mexico of music, right? And the actual history of it compared to what it is now. So that they're engaging in this knowledge, right? And we hope that those seeds that we're planting there, they bring back into their classrooms. What are my hopes and objectives for these programs, right? Consistency is always a trauma-informed practice that is overlooked. And so I want to be able to figure out how we can switch from, are we doing camp this year? Are we doing the Students of Color Conference this year? Into when are we doing it? When is it happening? And through that is like funding, right? How can we make the funding systematic for these programs so it's just automatic, we get to planning? I have friends in other school districts who every year are recruiting students for camp, and they're not just stressing about getting the permission slips in on time, they're stressing about funding, right? And it's come to like the day before camp when they're able to secure funding for their students to go to camp. So I want to make sure that our students don't have to worry about that. They can just sign up and then show up to the bus. With the Students of Color Conference, we want to be able to expand into parents. A Parents of Color Conference has been something that's brought up, expanding to the middle school. When it comes to community, Cascadia has already agreed to let us use their venue as well. So Friday, May 17th, this year is this year's conference. And we've talked about expanding the conference, but we also know that there's a lot of growth in the services that we have to provide all the students that are able to participate in our conference. So we decided to stick with Cascadia one more year so we can fine-tune several different things that'll help us be able to grow. And once that growth happens, we're able to serve with to the best of our abilities at that time.
Thank you. I also want to mention that one of the students in the video, you didn't see that because we unfortunately had so much content we edited out, but she was so inspired by the college visit because Cascadia provides our students with a college tour during the Student of Color Conference. She hadn't even thought of where she was going to go to school, hadn't considered her options, but our conference made it so that she saw herself in that school and said, you know what, I'm going to try. And so Olivia, who's in our video, she's actually a freshman this year at Cascadia College and knows it too, Student of Color, so that's obviously a sign of success for us. So if you've got questions or anything else you'd like us to clarify, we're here for that.
Have any questions? Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you.
The context for that was amazing because when I was looking through this report, I was really curious. I hadn't ever heard of La Cima or the Black Debutante Ball before, and so having that context is actually very helpful. Thank you. Sets us up nicely for OE14.
Yep, thank you.
Yes, Director Stewart.
there's a
Pablo,
question.
if you could provide us with more information about the needs for scholarships. A lot of us participate in various civic groups that raise money for scholarships, so if you could give us some examples, and it'd be great. Okay?
We will, thank you. We'll take you up on it. Thank you.
And again, I want to thank you all for coming here tonight, presenting so well, sharing those stories with us, because it does help to highlight the how the policy is actually helping to support the students in our district, and you're really leading that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So next on our agenda, we will be monitoring OE14, our anti-racism, anti-discrimination, equity, and inclusion in education, one of our 14 operational expectation policies. Through these policies, the board establishes its values about how the school district is expected to operate and the expressed conditions that must exist as business is conducted. The monitoring report contains the superintendent's interpretation of policy language, a review of current conditions and monitoring data. The monitoring actions make up part of the board's oversight of the organization and assures that the board that its operational standards have been met. Following the presentation, the board will have an opportunity for questions and comments. Dr. Holman, will you please present a summary of the monitoring report?
Well, our summary is maybe a little bit more than a summary this evening. This is the second time that we've monitored this policy. The board remembers a year ago when we brought to you a monitoring report, and many of the areas didn't have data yet because the policy had just been adopted, and so now it's exciting to see that there are data for all of the areas. There's still a couple of areas where we look at the data and we're not sure it's really answering the question that the board is asking, but that's part of this process as well, is continuing to refine and narrow in on the data that helps the board monitor the organization's compliance with operational expectation 14. And so tonight, OE14 is presented to the board as compliant with noted exceptions, and we will go through those exceptions. I want to underscore that the organization continues to make progress in a number of areas, and not every data point demonstrates high growth or high progress. But when I step back and just think of the overall data, there's so much work that's going into the implementation of this policy across the district. The presentation you just had from staff really demonstrates the empowerment that this policy has provided as we're trying to truly make our system accessible and available and beneficial to all students. And so on the screen, we have a presentation that we'll walk through. I'll walk through the first few slides, and then Matt will present the monitoring report. And so the policy statement, I won't read the entire thing, but I want to read the first sentence of this policy statement, that the board believes that each student has the potential to achieve at high levels and to accomplish significant academic and personal goals. And what this policy is about is understanding the gaps related to identity. And when the board states that it believes that each student, it truly means each student. And that's kind of the exciting part of this, is refining the system so that each and every student has access. The directive to the superintendent is explicit. States that the superintendent shall establish, maintain, and evolve a culture of inclusion and high expectations that values and respects the diversity and lived experience of its students, staff, and families. Specifically, the superintendent shall identify and eliminate discriminatory, inequitable, and biased systems, policies, and practice to 1, eliminate racist and discriminatory systems, structures, and practices within Lake Washington School District, replacing them with anti-racist and anti-discriminatory systems, structures, standards, and practice. 2, to ensure equitable opportunities for students. 3, ensure equitable treatment of students. And 4, to address and close persistent gaps for historically marginalized groups and enable every student to excel and achieve at high levels as evidenced by qualitative and quantitative disaggregated data. And so you think about this directive, this is aspirational work, and we know as we work to align our system with this directive, the more and more students are going to experience success, not just academic success, but that fulfillment, that personal fulfillment, that sense of belonging, the idea that students, as our staff talked about, that they can show up in their classrooms, in their schools, as their true and authentic selves. There are 11 policy components, of which Matt will go through. Next slide, Matt. Yep. And there's 4 key elements that I want to call your attention to that were part of our work in March as we talked about how do we monitor OE14 with effectiveness. And so there's 4 components here. One of those components is the video that you just saw. When we talked with Pablo and the team, we really dug in, like, how was this video created? What were the questions that were asked? Did you only show the positive remarks? And so we really wanted to make sure that the voice of our students were being elevated for the board as part of the evidentiary package that we provide you for OE14. The professional development report, detailing all of the aspects of professional development, the annual report highlighting, as it says here, the development and adoption of anti-racist and inclusive lessons, instructional guides, and curricular materials. And finally, we did provide the board with written anecdotes around some of our restorative practices to provide evidence as well. And so these 4 components alone provide kind of some key insights into the systems work that is currently happening, and it demonstrates how infused this work is in everything that we're doing. And finally, evaluating of the monitoring report. And I know we've spoken with a number of board members about how did you measure compliance with noted exceptions versus non-compliance? A couple of pieces here. One, when we're looking at our panorama data, remember in results 3, we looked at both favorable and neutral. In OE14, we're looking at favorable responses. And then when we're determining compliance, because there's a number of indicators that are different data sets and really looking at different parts of the system, there's some work around looking at, are we seeing positive trends overall? Is the relative rate of change going in the direction that we're looking for? Looking at areas of disproportionality, not have we closed all gaps, but are we seeing disproportionality reduce? And so that's some of the art of trying to monitor OE14 and provide a report to the board that is accurate. And so with that, I will hand it to Matt to walk us through one last component of the development of the report, and then jump into the monitoring components.
Great, thank you, Dr. Holman. We have a commitment to ensuring that the board's policies really do live and drive the work of the district. And so as part of that, one of the things that we did to essentially analyze the policy is we took our central leadership team and we engaged in that team in a data walk. And first of all, I think what's really important about that process is that probably more so than any one of our policies, this is a policy that touches all areas of the organization. And so therefore, it really represents a shared opportunity for leadership throughout the organization. And so, so part of the process and part of the reason we did this is it gives us an opportunity to continue to socialize the board's interests and values for the organization and the expectations that they have for the superintendent with the breadth of leaders that we have that run all the different elements of the school district. And so continuing to socialize that, have them actually wrestle with what does it mean, is this how we're monitoring and attending to it, is really important, because what we want them to do is also be able to identify what are the things within their locus of control, what is their sphere of influence that they have in order to help us realize continued progress with this policy. And that the benefit of also having multiple eyes look onto this policy and look at our data and help try to make sense of it. Because there's a lot of data there. We have a lot of indicators. Even within those indicators, I mean, there is a lot of different data to try to pull out. And we didn't want that to necessarily just be pulled out, just by myself or Dr. Holman. And so what we did is we engaged the central leadership team. We had them work in triads, and we'd put all, posters all around the room, 14-1, 14-2. And they had time to look deeply at the data set within each of those policy areas. We asked them to identify what are celebrations. And it's important for us to be looking at where are areas that we're enjoying some success, where there's something there's positive movement that's going on. And, this is hard, challenging work to really disrupt some systems that have been in place for a very long time. And Adana earlier mentioned it's also can be really joyous work. And so celebrating areas where we've seen some movement, because that reflects hard work of people within our school system to do that. And then we called out what are areas of concern, because we still have a long ways to go. So what are some of those areas of concerns? Areas in which we're maybe not realizing the progress that we'd like to realize thus far, or maybe we're seeing something's moving in the wrong direction. And then we asked them to also identify curiosities, because as we've come back to the board, this is our second time monitoring, and we will get data and we're kind of like, well, either that makes us curious about, well, we want to know more about this so we can try to unpack it, or maybe sometimes does the data tell us what we think it tells us. And so we had them go and engage in a gallery walk where they analyzed multiple sections, had an opportunity to process it, and then we actually checked our processing with the entire group, so that if somebody didn't get to a section, they're like, nope, that's I had something to add on that. So we will also be taking back, as the board responds to OE14, we'll be kind of reversing that process and looking at how does the board's response to where our monitoring this year, how does that inform the direction and where we need to go for the future. So this is important, I think, particularly for OE14, that it is really is a policy that has a shared responsibility throughout the leadership team. All right. So at this point in time, I'm going to walk us through each of the policy sections. There will be some areas that we'll spend a little bit more time on, and there'll be some areas that we will just kind of reference the compliance rating and maybe note the data, but then just refer the board back to the monitoring report. So 14.1, ensuring students that have an anti-racist, inclusive, equitable, welcoming, and safe school and classroom environment. We have 5 different indicators of compliance, and the compliance rating is indicating in compliance with exceptions noted. So, as Dr. Holman mentioned earlier, one of the, I'll talk here first. So, coming back to kind of the central leadership team, some of the highlights that they pulled out is we saw a year-over-year increase in affirmative perception responses. So that's on the Panorama survey from both our students and families, that they observed an increase in cultural awareness and action in their schools. Conversely, we also saw a year-over-year decrease in sense of belonging by students and families. So celebration and a concern. So here's our Panorama. Table 1 references our student Panorama survey. This is favorable responses, so it's only including the 2 favorable responses, does not include a neutral response. And as you can see, the annual trend for our elementary students broadly is indicating a decline in sense of belonging as compared to spring of 2022, with exception of Black African American students cited an increase of 1.5%. For middle school, and also we'll see for high school, we actually had a slight upward trend. For most groups, was about up a point or 1.5. Generally, my experience with Panorama data is that movement of 1% to 2% is kind of the typical sort of noise. And so we've seen our survey data is kind of go up and down by those a little bit each year. And so I would probably not draw broad conclusions about a movement of a percentage point one direction or the other. And so for high school, we see similar kind of movement as we saw to middle school. All right, and then table 4 here representing cultural awareness and action on the Panorama survey. And here, this is a survey that is only, this question bank is only asked of our secondary students, so it is not asked of our elementary students. And here we're seeing year-over-year growth, more in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 4%. Sorry, I'm navigating 2 screens and trying to keep track of both. And similar at the high school level, we're seeing year-over-year growth of 2.5 to 3% on all. So the board just saw the students' video, and this was our new qualitative element, and it was one that we defined as engaging student voice, and the expectation is that that we produce a product. Could be a video, could be another form of report. This was our first go at it, and so students who'd participated in either the Black Debutante Ball, the Students of Color Conference, or La Cima were asked if they would care to participate in an interview. A number of students participated, and as Director Ortega commented earlier, responded to a prompt both of about their experience with that particular program, as well as their experience in the district, knowing that it was going to be presented to the board. And so all the students volunteered for that and came in, and then I believe that the video was also shared back with them as a chance to get a check to say, hey, this is how it's kind of all put together, and so that if there was any sort of misrepresentation or anything, that there was an opportunity to check that. And so I imagine this will be something that will evolve over time as we think about kind of expanding different student groups, voices, or prompts that will help us continue to understand the student experience, and recognizing that experience is multifaceted. And so, but it's a way for us to have some sort of qualitative experience to go along with the perception data experience that we have.
I think it probably makes sense to stop after each
We can do that.
sub-policy for
Yep.
any questions or concerns. Director Guthrie.
Yeah, just a comment, and I know we talked about this with R3 monitoring as well, but sort of the limitations of Panorama's, what they define as cultural awareness and action, that it's really focused on race and ethnicity. Are there any thoughts about how we can take a broader lens, thinking about special education, thinking about multilingual learners, for example, which is different from race and ethnicity? Yeah, just any thoughts on how we can get at that, both in things like the Student Voices video, and then of course with just with maybe thinking about indicators other than Panorama.
Yeah, so and it's actually, I kind of appreciate monitoring R3 and then OE14 because I believe a lot of the same sort of conversations around understanding the student experience that came up in R3 apply to OE14. So one of the things, the takeaways that we had from R3 was going back to Panorama and continuing to have a conversation, really to try to help think about the extent to which we're using their tool and their questions as, we're using them essentially as a proxy for how well does that might that apply in the broader kind of spectrum of student experience. So in the case of applying, we focus around kind of that social engagement in the context of conversations around race, and is that a fair proxy to apply more broadly? And so I think Director Guthrie, your question too is around. And so when we're asking about students' experiences and questions specifically related to race and ethnicity, how applicable might that be, or unapplicable is that to other student experiences? So, so we're going to re-engage with Panorama, both to understand the tool that we have and what sort of options that we might have within that. The other conversation that we had with R3, and that we're not necessarily bringing to the fore right at this moment, but the idea of what sort of data, where do we get curious about, where we kind of need to dive in and do, get a little bit more of a street data sort of experience. The OE14 is very expansive. And so we're going to want to pick an area to say, well, how do we better understand this? And so with R3, we talked about student sense of self-efficacy being that place. I think there's a number of places we can jump into and dive into within this policy. So we hadn't quite landed on that. I think wanted to bring that to the board, kind of get a sense of where the board was at. But that would also help us kind of point into those. And I think this policy just broadly in general is one that's, is constantly kind of living. Where we're checking as like the data that we're using, getting at the intent of the policy. And so I don't have an immediate kind of like this is it, but I will share that that I think that's part of the journey with this is to continue to refine and think about that, and also as we're probably looking at where's our quantitative data pointing us where we might need to better understand and picking some areas to kind of prioritize.
Dr. Stewart?
To build on Dr. Guthrie's comments, I'd also like to make sure that we see what we can do with Panorama to engage more on income as well. I know that's a difficult one for us to do so, but the ability to target information about connectivity and so forth with the low-income students who may have a harder road to hoe, and to be quite frank, there's a lot of overlap, I realize, in the various data, but still, they're more likely to not have the opportunity for college, and I think we need to find out how we can reach them and how we can assist them. Also, if I'll come back to it if I think of it.
Shira? I was just wondering if Panorama is like our main primary source of like data collection, because I feel like we are almost forcing the students to put their opinions in like yes, no, maybe so, and like I feel like it's a huge spectrum.
Yeah, so right now, Panorama data is, when we're talking about kind of a survey and kind of perception data, it is our main tool. One of the things that we wrestled with a bit last year was how do we start to introduce qualitative data around student experience? So the video is kind of one element, and one of the things we part of wrestling with that is thinking about how is it both authentic, that the students themselves want to engage in it so that it's not kind of this transactional or extractive experience. And so I believe the video is a first start and step as we're wanting to intentionally engage in the process of gathering and representing student voice, but to kind of have that motto of also do no harm through that process. So So yes, I think this will be a continued area where we kind of develop and refine and think about how to do that. The other thing on the survey is also recognizing. I think there's some limitations of the survey. One is it is a dipstick of that moment in time for the student's experience. In fact, when we survey students on the same item in the fall and in the spring, they feel very differently in the spring than they tend to in the fall. So it kind of reflects a particular moment or experience, and it reflects how students are feeling on that moment. And typically the longer survey items, the more survey items we get, also the fewer the lower response rates that we tend to get. So we're also mindful of, we could ask you everything, and kind of how meaningful is that in that trade-off.
I finally remembered. Okay, we've only been in Panorama for 2 years, as I recall, or a few years. How long till we actually can see a trend that I'd hate for us to start going down a path based on a very short trend. In fact, I wouldn't even call it a trend, but short number of opinions. Yet at the same time, I don't want to see inertia. So do you have a proposal for how to address both of those needs?
Yeah, so with our trend data, typically we use 4 years as constituting of trend. And in looking back, and I can't recall with R3, we're also looking at essentially what's kind of within that, the range of error. So when we're seeing movement of, the +1 kind of, sub, 2, that's really easy. We've seen, because we've been using Panorama for multiple years, part of our challenge with how we use it for monitoring is that we've made some adjustments. In this policy, we've only done it twice. We've also only done it twice. So we don't have some of that year over year, but we have other items that we've been asking from like the counseling program for years, and so we can see trend data. So,
but does that Bobby, having two different sources to compare, does that really give you a trend that you can actually follow? Because it seems like it would be on separate tracks.
Sorry, Director Stewart, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. The idea that you have Panorama, but you said you had surveys from counselors or information from counselors. It seemed like they wouldn't necessarily track the same, so you wouldn't be able to compare apples to apples.
Yeah, so a lot of the questions so we've been using Panorama for a long time. It initially started with the counseling program and at the elementary level. So we actually have more data going back in elementary. We just started using Panorama with secondary students more recently. And some of these question banks, so if I were to go back, the cultural responsiveness, we've only been asking for a couple of years. So we don't have that trend data yet.
And I believe, I think the other piece around, I'm on table 2, favorable sense of belonging. The work around ensuring that students identify as having a sense of belonging, we know that's the right work. And so it's less about, does the trend tell us what to do? The trend really helps to confirm, is the work we're doing providing that help and support, but we know that high quality SEL curriculum is good for kids. We know that having behavioral health supports is, and so it's not, I don't believe we're waiting for a trend to say, let's go in this direction. We're going in this direction because we know it's the right thing, and then it's more refinement. And if we see student groups that aren't trending in similar directions, then it's refinement for those student groups, as opposed to wholesale change of not do SEL curriculum and support. So that's kind of how I think about these data. There's a couple student groups that we have 2 years worth of data, and to me, when you see a 9-point decline for Gender X students, even with a low N, we should pay attention to that. And so that's how I think about it.
One last question. I see evidence in the data for anti-racist, inclusive, equitable, welcoming. I'm having trouble finding safe school and classroom environments in the data that's presented. There was some reference to it in the video, but I'm curious if that is an area where we could potentially have quantitative data to support this indicator.
Yes, I think we. So, if I understood correctly, so hearing is that specifically identifying evidence that would relate to the environmental safety.
And so I believe as I look at the set of indicators that are currently adopted by the board, I believe what I hear is a request to look at the indicators to see if there's a connection between the indicators and reporting.
All right, are there any further questions on 14.1? Okay, all right, 14.2. Ensuring staff have an anti-racist, inclusive, equitable, welcoming, and safe work environment. Here we have 5 indicators of compliance, and we're noting that it's in compliance with exceptions noted. And so here we continue to see an increase in staff that identifies people of color. However, staff of color continue to report a lower sense of belonging than white staff. We did this year have a decrease in recruitment of leaders of color as compared to previous years. And we're also noting that there's some overlap between data in 14.2 and 14.7. So for those data that are in both places, and I believe that was we made an intentional decision or intentional recognition of that when we revisited this policy last spring. But so just focusing on those data sets here and won't revisit them in 14.7. So percent favorable, favorable sense of belonging. So we did see some increases with the exception of our Hispanic Latino instructional staff who reported a decline of sense of belonging from the prior year. These are, in the case of for our Asian staff, white staff, it is, a larger sense of belonging increase. Because of our suppression rules, though, that you'll notice that for a number of our staff, this data is suppressed, which limits kind of its value and usefulness right now. And so that's one of the things we're going to have to go back and look at. How do we impact this in such a way that allows us to actually leverage this data or use this data and so we talked about ways of combining groups or something, so that way we can actually kind of get a sense for our staff of color what their experience is. So. And then here is, so we ask our staff similar sorts of cultural awareness and action questions, kind of the opposite perspective for as students. This is a bit of a mixed bag. We see, depending on the group, some are reporting more favorably, and some groups are reporting less favorably. The overall trend is favorable. So. For our instructional staff, the overall, there's an increase from the prior year, and our non-instructional staff as well represent an increase year over year. Same issue as before, though, with suppression rules around reporting the data, that a lot of our staff groups are not represented in this data set. And then calling out here is looking at what is the composition of staff within the Lake Washington School District. And so you can see that we have increasingly grown more racially diverse over the past 5 years. So the data sets reported as a percentage of the entire staff population is in the table below. So you can see that in 2018 and 19, the percentage of staff that identified as white was 82.6, whereas in 22-23, the percentage of staff that identified as white was 76.3. Seen our largest increase in staff that identifies Asian. In 2018-19, represented 8% of the staff population, and in 22-23 representing 12.3%. And just to kind of zero in a little bit, because the trend line can be kind of hard to see, so I took out our white staff and kind of just zoomed in so you could get a sense of the trend line. Hispanic Latino is also increasing. We have a couple of groups that have been relatively flat: American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander in particular. And then we have a number of retention data that's in the report. So we're just here highlighting percent of staff retention after 1 year. And so you can generally see that there is kind of a decline in retention. And so this is all groups represented. And then here, the shading's a little, it's better on the screen than it is on mine. So you can see the shaded area represents all. And so our overall retention has been declining. Some of this, I will note, has been intentional and expected, though. So we actually increased the number of employees in the school district during the pandemic. That was intentional. We had a lot of employees who were hired on a temporary 1 year, 2 year basis, everything from, we hired additional teachers when we were in kind of that remote hybrid and needed to expand. We hired case managers, so all of those employees are represented on this group. And then we also have had a declining student enrollment, which has meant that we've also had more employees that particularly certificated employees that are hired on initially on non-continuing contracts, and then we've had fewer that we've been able to or needed to retain for the subsequent year. So to the extent that our student enrollment population continues to decline, that naturally will mean that we also will have reduced retention data, because employees that were hired, initially, if we're declining, we'll need fewer employees. So another note is that in many cases, often our employees that are kind of our most junior or newest employees to the school district are often the first ones to be, non-renewed or not to have the ability to come back when we have a declining enrollment and need to have a reduction in force, or just, people are coming back from leave. And so, and given that the increase, and most recent increase in hiring has been our most diverse, that this, it is likely that we'll continue to see this not trend in a way that we would typically like to go, and that may impact the diversity of our staff more than we would like. All right, any questions about 14.2?
Do we have any sense of how our retention compares statewide, nationwide, like whatever, something broader? Because it's hard for me to contextualize, the retention rates.
Yeah, that is a great question. I don't have that data offhand. I was just looking at OSPI was citing some retention numbers for specific groups recently, which then got me curious about what's our specific retention for that particular group. Which I believe we're way higher than that. But so that is that context I don't have for you right now, but that's something we can follow up on. Okay.
All right, so 14.3 is providing students with equitable access and an inclusive environment to opportunities including extracurricular activities such as school clubs and athletics. We identify 4 different indicators of compliance, and at this time are indicating that we are in compliance. I will note that part of the conversation last spring that the board engaged in around this particular area, there was a recognition of a lot of our data is heavily relies on student participation in athletics. And while we have a high participation in athletics, so about 1/3 of our students participate in athletics, we also know that a lot of our students participate in other clubs and activities, and they're not represented in here. And so the board expressed an interest in saying, how do we get a better picture of kind of the entire experience? There are some limitations to our current systems and how we do that, but we are actively exploring ways in which that we would be able to get that information and be able to represent that here. So I don't know. I don't have a time frame for the board in which we would be able to do that, but it is part of something we are looking at, and we are looking at both because there's a benefit for us to understand that and to be able to monitor it, and because we've identified some other operational reasons where it makes sense, and that was also part of the conversation of wanting to think about that in the context of operations. So we see increased levels of participation in athletics for students identifying as Hispanic Latino, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, students from low-income households, students receiving multilingual services, or receiving special education services. We continue to make progress with respect to compliance with Title IX participation. And I was informed that one of our high schools met Part 1 of Title IX, which is a pretty significant milestone, and it is hard to get there. It's hard to stay there, but I'm certainly proud of the work that our teams and schools have done, because they've set that as the benchmark to try to continually do that rather than the other ways in which they could demonstrate compliance. So we have implemented a waiver process for student participation in extracurriculars, so students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. And we are continuing to evaluate options for gaining a better perspective on engagement in extracurriculars beyond athletics. I actually am not presenting any data on that. There's data in the Monterey report related to all of those. Are there any questions on 14.3?
Dr. Stewart.
I don't know how you do it, but I'd like to find out if we could find out how many of our students, in addition to extracurriculars or instead of extracurriculars, are working after school. I think it would be very valuable to find the corollaries between who feels they belong or who has a sense of, or different senses of needs if they're working after school as opposed to being able to participate in clubs.
I jotted down a note of indicator focused on work. One of our graduation pathways, or one of the graduation pathways, will assign compliance for work experience. And so I don't know in the future if, as we're developing the graduation pathways, if that's the avenue to kind of get after that request. And so I offer that because, that's one of the ways that we may be able to track as well.
I don't know if employment in high school is going to reflect the type of employment they'd be actually seeking post-high school. So I don't know. Hopefully that would have a correlation for us, but I know I left restaurant work when I was 22.
I had a question regarding the waiver process for students participating in extracurriculars for those that qualify for free and reduced lunch programs. I know for our area the cost of living is so high, but the threshold is so low to qualify for free and reduced lunch because you have to meet the federal definition for low income. Is that correct? So I'm curious if we have students that do not qualify for free and reduced lunch but cannot participate in extracurriculars due to cost. I feel like that's a method of exclusion that we're potentially missing. And then the other question would be, how many of our students are not participating because they cannot physically get to an activity, transportation issues?
Yeah, I think maybe responding to both those points and to Director Stuar's points, I believe one way we may eventually want to kind of get out there is essentially what you're all identifying is, so for students who aren't participating, what are the reasons why they may not choose to participate? And is it reflective of because their interests are elsewhere, which is it's totally fine, right? I'm interested in this activity. I'm not interested in athletics, or I'm interested in working, or I need to work, or I'm interested in doing whatever. But that essentially that we're identifying do our students have interest related to, and how does this relate to what we aren't offering as experiences, and then. If I'm interested in something that is being offered, to what extent, what are potential barriers for my participation? Seems to be kind of as I'm listening to you, that those are kind of the crux at it. So I believe what we've identified kind of as an initial step is we have a whole piece of, right, 2/3 of our pie chart of our student, we don't really know what they're participating in. And so trying to kind of fill out the rest of that picture is kind of the next step. And then as we get that, then we can say, so what is it that we're missing? So, because we'll get a sense of, are we missing, this small of a slice, or is it, wow, there's 50% of our kids aren't engaged in anything related to our school. So there's another data point. Healthy Youth Survey does ask students about their access, and those, I'm not going to quote a percent favorable, but the response has typically been pretty high in terms of students feeling like they have that as a choice or an access point. But again, it's one survey, and that is a very lengthy survey. I think it's 165 questions, somewhere along. So it's so it's one that is it's asked, but may or may not be really providing the accurate picture that we would want.
Yeah, one more. Director Liberty?
I have a question on the details of the waiver process for students that qualify for free and reduced lunch. I was reading our website. And tell me if my reading is correct. If a student qualifies for free and reduced lunch and consents and selects the consent to share that information, they automatically receive a waiver. There's no further application or request that has to be made. The default, I guess, as long as they're sharing that and they qualify, they get a waiver.
Yeah.
Right?
So prior to this process, students who would have qualified essentially had to then kind of raise their hand and saying, hey, I need that, which is another barrier.
Yes.
And so that process is essentially automated that to kind of take down that barrier.
Okay. Well, that's even more than a waiver. I mean, that's an opt. You have to almost opt well. It's more of an automated waiver, which is really important, I think. Yeah. So I think it's worth highlighting. Thank you.
All right, 14.4. So this is a policy section that the board wrestled with back in the spring, providing students with equitable access to rigorous coursework. And so I'm going to look at we have two different indicators that we landed on for the moment. So one is we're looking at an increasing rate of underrepresented populations as measured proportionally in algebra in middle school. And the rationale for algebra in middle school was that as a high school level course taken at middle school, and that would be a good indicator, and it's also an important access point. Students take algebra in middle school, that essentially gets them 1 year accelerated on the math pathway, which opens up different science courses and just provides greater flexibility in the high school schedule. So while that's not the only high school course taken in middle school, it seemed to be like the best kind of barometer.
And then looking at dual credit programs. So dual credit programs in high school are courses that, that qualify for college credit. And so those are examples are advanced placement courses, AP courses, college in the high school courses, Running Start, and specific tech prep courses. And so at this time, we're looking at students who earn a dual credit. And then an indicator that we have that we do not have data on yet, and that's part of the work of this year, is to identify how do our students report increasing levels of rigorous classroom expectations. Part of the conversation there was that it's critically important for all of our students, each and every student, to feel like there are there's things that are expected of them. They are in a classroom environment that has high expectations, high levels of academic rigor, and so we didn't have a way to measure that. So there's no data from last year that we're bringing forward, but that is a commitment for us to kind of figure that out and how we might get that data. And so knowing that we only essentially have the one indicator ready, and it's a bit of a mixed bag, so we're saying it's in compliance with exceptions noted. So interestingly, we do see a decline in algebra completion in the middle school, and that was noticeably lower for some subgroups of students. We do anticipate one of the things that was called out by folks within our instructional services is that we are launching Math 6 Plus this year. And so one of the things is that as we've looked at the student's ability to access algebra, if you essentially didn't enter kind of on that pathway from elementary school, it required a very significant jump to go from essentially Math 6 if you were going to jump 7th grade. And so there's just concepts that students would miss. It really could give you pause to, do you really want to do that? You're essentially jumping kind of almost like a whole grade level. And so our instructional services team, our teaching and learning department, has really worked on looking with our middle school math teachers of how do we start to embed the right type of instructional practices and curricular exposure in the 6th grade, such that students would essentially be able to accelerate into algebra should they so choose. And so we had previously done some work a few years back to try to remove barriers to entry. So we were removing barriers, but then we also had to think about how are we increasing the types of supports. And so this coming year with the addition of Math 6 Plus, we're essentially saying we're recognizing that there's a need in those additional supports at the middle level. And hopefully that means that in the coming couple of years, that we'll actually we'll be able to look at. We'll know that we had this marker and point in time, and then we'll be able to look at and say, are we starting to see a change in enrollment in algebra or successful completion of algebra in middle school that was different than the data that I'm showing you today. Director Stewart?
Yes. Do we have data that shows if it varies from school to school in relationship to the joining of algebra at certain ages? I'm looking at, Brad, I'm thinking of the high school, in the complaints of some schools that they have less rigorous math opportunities. I'm wondering if we have data that shows that whether it's 6th grade or middle school, access to algebra differs from one school to the next.
I'm sure that we have that. We haven't looked at that as part of the monitoring of this. So we didn't disaggregate by schools. We were disaggregating just by student groups in this.
It might be helpful to see then how that has an impact on the high schools.
Okay, and then we do see an increase in dual credit participation at the high school. One of the curiosities, though, is we're reporting that out as one large group, and as I had just shared the slide prior, there are differences in the experience of the choices around AP, college and high school, Running Start, et cetera. So that may be an area of interest for us to eventually start breaking that out given where we're currently at. So here's is a line graph, and you can see it's up against all students participating in algebra. And we do have disproportionality in terms of the percentage of students who are receiving credit for algebra by the end of middle school. And so also on here, oh, I thought I made the change. I'm sorry. So on here is also represented, in addition to students identified by race or ethnicity, we're also identifying students from low-income households and students receiving special education services. And I thought I'd updated this to also include students receiving English language or ML services as well. But so you can see that we have some disproportionality, and that largely that has been kind of flat or slightly declining. And so this will be an area of keen interest for us to monitor over the next couple of years, particularly given the change with Math 6 Plus as a way to try to ensure that algebra is accessible to all students. And then here's our data on percent of graduates for receiving credit for at least one dual credit course in high school. The one student group that is kind of at the lowest line there, students who are currently eligible for multilingual services while they're in high school. You can see that students who are previously eligible for multilingual services are right up there, kind of consistent with where the overall kind of all population is. Any questions on 14.4?
If you go back to the algebra slide,
Yes.
Are there any ideas why there was a pretty significant rise from 2019 to 2020, like pretty much across the board, and then it's sort of leveled off? Was there anything magical that happened? I mean, it's kind of pre-pandemic.
It was magical. So I referenced that there was a point in time in which we had made some intentional changes to the entry requirements to algebra, and so that was at that point. That was about that at that point in time, and where we changed our entry requirements, and so. And then we hit the pandemic and hadn't. So it's kind of like we recognized that there were some barriers to entry, and actually through that process, our data accountability team had identified that there were some students where there were some exceptions that were made, and so they hadn't met the entry criteria, but they were in the class, which gave us a great example to see, well, actually, that those students were being successful. And so it allowed us to essentially revisit, well, what are the criteria for entering algebra in middle school, because we have it here. We had a students data set for students that were like, well, they didn't meet it, but they're doing well, and so that was the era that change was made, and then but then you can see that kind of captured a small percentage of students, but there was not really the same sort of commensurate change on the instructional program. And that's what Math 6 Plus is looking at, saying, okay, what's the type of support that can make algebra more accessible for students to be a viable option in middle school?
Yeah, and I would also like to echo Director Stewart's comment. Having been through this, sort of decision point or sort of the branch, the language that's used to talk about, whether or not this is a good option. I'm guessing it varies from school to school, but yeah, I very clearly remember, going to a meeting where it was basically like, well, this really isn't a good idea. Like, your child has qualified, but it's really not a good idea to go on to algebra. So looking at those practices across schools could be really interesting. Of how are they positioning this? Because it's ultimately a family decision. Kids, you've got the data set for kids, but it's really on us as parents. To say, yes, we're going to do this with our child, or no. So understanding how we're framing that to parents could be really critical.
Yeah. And I know that Associate Superintendent Rose, who's been leading a lot of this work, has also, part of the work in preparing for Math 6 Plus has also been to engage with math departments around kind of beliefs and values, and how we approach and think about students' ability to be successful in courses, because that sends a message to students of whether we think they could be successful or not. And there very well can be reasons why a student might not be ready, in terms of to be able to access that. And so trying to ensure that we're giving that information to families so they can make an informed decision, but one that's not unduly biased is important. So those culture kind of conversations have been part of the process as far as thinking about the curricular adoption as well.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the goal is for algebra in the 8th grade to not be a family decision at one point, right? The goal is for all of our students to access and be prepared for algebra by the 8th grade in the future. Is that?
So the board just updated results too, and as part of that update, it was measuring not just participation but success. And I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's either a C or better or a B or better in algebra by 8th grade.
But will 8th grade math still be offered? I'm actually not clear on that.
Yes.
Shira and I were wondering if you have data for students receiving credit for geometry by the end of middle school, and if that's considered in this analysis.
Okay, that's a great question. It is not considered in this analysis. I'm sure that we have it, so we didn't grab geometry. So if a student, so let's just let me make sure maybe how I should interpret your question. So if a student took algebra in 7th grade, they are represented here. Okay, because they successfully earned algebra credit prior to middle school. So if you take algebra in 7th grade, you're in this data set. If you take algebra in 8th grade, you're in this data set. We chose not to focus on geometry because essentially that means you have to be on that pathway beginning in 7th grade, and that's so that's a very much an accelerated pathway that a number of our students take, and is perfectly appropriate. But algebra, given the conversations that the board had around R2 and really when we look at our high school pathways, getting to algebra 2 by your sophomore year is what really opens up. Certainly if you get it by your freshman year, it opens up a lot of options, but it opens up the most options if most of the options are open if you successfully take algebra 2 by your sophomore year. Shira?
And then I was also wondering if you guys looked at data, what type of math course the student was taking entering their 9th grade year, because I know that summer between 8th and 9th grade is really critical for students who decide to take an online course because they didn't qualify during middle school or they didn't have access to the course.
Okay. We did not look at that data set.
Director Bleasner.
So I just have two questions. One is, as you implement the 6+ with the math, so the one piece is I look at the algebra data, and as this is the anti-equity, anti-discrimination sort of compliance piece, the gap is more of that I look at in regards to this, especially in regards to our low-income Latino and Black students that we see. And so my question is, I recognize the implementation of 6+. Is there consideration being given as to extra supports or additional strategies in which to support students because they haven't been accessing this in the past? And that was very long-winded.
Yeah, I think we're in this process. We have some programs in our middle schools that we have in place that we are in the process of evaluating, that I wouldn't want to go into a lot of detail right now, but that's something we can follow up on.
That would be great. And the other thing is I'd like to say, I think it's great to be able to divide out, as you had mentioned, the dual credit options. I think that would be beneficial to be able to look at that.
And then one more question, is 6+ like the new standard for all 6th graders, or is there an option to take 6 and 6+, and then 7+?
Yeah, so I believe, I'm going to just check, Scott, it is everybody, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so 6+ is the new standard. So it had been piloted at a couple of schools, and so there was a time where we had some middle schools that were taking 6 and some that were doing 6+. But the idea being that that way we're able to prepare all students. So then they're at this current stage, then they're able to make some of those choices or have those choices available to them. 14.5 is ensuring that student access to educational programs is equitable in policy and practice. And so this is another policy area that the board had modified earlier this year. So I'm going to talk about the indicators of compliance. So one of the indicators of compliance is that we're looking at levels of participation measured proportionally in highly capable programs, and we're looking here to the degree that those are increasing. Conversely, we're looking that there's decreasing levels of participation measured proportionally in special education. So, and then we also are looking at and trying to understand the application rate for choice schools as compared to the participation rate for choice schools. And then another indicator that was added that we did not have data from last year, but that secondary student interest survey data demonstrates that our current opportunities match student interest level. The idea being there is that looking to say, are students participating in the programs that we're offering, and if they're not electing to participate, is that because we're meeting their interest, or is that they're an unsatisfied interest? So that will be another area that we'll be figuring out how best to get that and bring back to the board. So again, indicating that we're in compliance with noted exceptions. And so looking at our summary and findings, we see increases in participation in highly capable programs broadly, and we see increases notably from our Hispanic Latino students, our Black African American students, students from low-income households, all increased at a rate greater than the rate of increase for the district. Conversely, on the special education, we saw declines across the board for identification for special education, with notable decreases for Black African American students, Hispanic Latino students, and students receiving multilingual services. We do continue to see disproportionality in these programs, but should this current movement become momentum, if that's sustained, it's promising. I think that was the term I used with R3. The data is promising; it's moving in the right directions, and so if that's something that's able to be sustained, that will certainly be cause for celebration. This is the first year that we're reporting choice school application. We did see an increase in diverse applications for those programs, but that was not reflected in enrollment, and so that's an area that I would say is a big curiosity for us. And in particular, wanting to understand, we have this data, but then is it telling us what we think it's telling us, or answering the questions that we might have there? So here's we look at our percentage students in grades K-8 enrolled in highly capable programs. And you can see the shaded area reflects all students. And generally, there's been an upward trend for all students, and that has been increasing, although with the exception, I believe, of Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islanders, has been an increase for all groups. When we look at the trend, there are some groups that have gone up, and then some slight declines just in this past year. And then similarly with percent of students in special education programs, generally we've seen a decline in students identified for special education across the board.
and for all groups. And I want to call out here, so the district had been identified for significant disproportionality by OSPI, the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, for disproportionality for Black African American students or Hispanic Latino students. And this year, and the board received information on this earlier, OSPI informed the district that it was had made sufficient progress to no longer be considered for significant disproportionality. And you can see the trend lines for these two groups as trending in a positive direction, where they are still disproportionately identified for special education services, but less so, and getting closer to that trend is moving in a positive direction. And then choice schools. So the board received in its monitoring report data on choice school and applications or interest, and then participation. And noted before that there was, we saw some increase in interest, but not necessarily reflected in participation. And so I believe that this is probably an area that merits further conversation with the board this year to try to make sure that we're unpacking that data in a way and understanding that data relative to the board's interests and values. All right, any questions on 14.5?
Director Guthrie.
Do we have any sort of systemic follow-up? It seems like in this data I saw two interesting groups. One would be highly capable students who are identified but are not participating. And another would be choice school applicants who don't end up enrolling. Obviously, some of them didn't get in the lottery, but also some of those students, and we kind of saw different rates of. It wasn't like one to, or like it wasn't the same ratio of applications to enrollment for all student groups. So has there been any sort of discussion of systemic follow-up with, I'm just very curious about those two groups, and we seem to sort of have them at our fingertips. What are we doing to understand what their reasons are for not enrolling in these programs when they have them available?
Yeah, so no, we haven't done that follow-up, and I think that's calling that out as trying to better understand that, because, and as you noted, right, the data, it wasn't clear. One group would be up relative to interest, and one group was down relative to their interest. And just looking at it was hard to kind of make sense and draw, like even some theories based on that. Sometimes we can draw some theories and then go to test that assumption, but that data was a little perplexing. So I think that's something that would be good. Because it was, in the spring, high area of interest to kind of for the board to wrestle with what exactly is the board's interest around choice schools. So it's probably something we should come back to in a study session to unpack a little bit more, and then possibly figure out what additional data might we need to grab to better understand that, maybe even to inform the rest of the conversation. All right, 14.6, providing curriculum and instruction that is culturally responsive and inclusive to the student population. Here we have three different indicators of compliance. I'm going to note one indicator, and it's not publicly available yet. The board received an advance copy of the annual report, but that's something that we will get published up on the website. We have an interest that is available for all of our public to be able to access and see, so that's a commitment that I'll be following up on to ensure that gets up on the website. So summary and findings, we did see a decline in our family perception regarding instructional programs. We do continue to use OSPI's screening tool in evaluating instructional materials. So the OSPI had developed really kind of a paradigm or a framework for school districts to assess whether curriculum is culturally responsive, and appropriate, and so we use that. And this will be the first year that we're publishing a report related to both professional learning and curriculum material,
And here is the cover of said report. In that report, there we identify what curriculum, lessons, and instructions were adopted or kind of introduced into the system. We actually outline all of the professional development that was developed centrally and delivered centrally. So if schools engaged, because our principals engaged in independent professional learning and development with their staffs, that's not reflected here, so any kind of localized professional learning, because we have 56 schools that are doing all this. So we focused on trying to capture what are the things that are centrally being made available or expected or introduced for all staff. We also highlight, even though it's not this is not necessarily responsive to particularly to OE 14, but was a commitment we made in our administrative equity policy, is highlighting what are the student affinity groups and programs. The board heard about some of those today. They're reflected there. And then also calling out what are some of the restorative practices and policies that are being introduced. And again, while that's not while 1410 calls that out, this is not necessarily an indicator responsive to that. But as we've worked with our community, these were all things that our community had expressed an interest in wanting to understand. And certainly our hope that what that does is it kind of lays out, it's like making, it's like we're showing our work. And so then can help us kind of shift the conversation to not what are you doing, but are we focused on the right areas? Are we actually seeing the results for what relative to what we're doing? So the hope is that it kind of helps honor our commitment to our community, as well as helps advance the dialogue around equity and inclusion in the school district. All right, any questions on 14.6?
I will say that when I read through the annual report, I was just amazed at the sheer quantity of things the district is doing to support staff around the equity work. I mean, you hear anecdotally through program updates and presentations and stories, but actually seeing it all written and described, like it was impressive. I expected it to be like a couple minutes of a read, and I was sitting there for a good 20 minutes reading through this booklet. So I actually really appreciate it, and I look forward to it being available for the public to see. I'm going to propose a 5-minute break right now, and then we will be back after a short recess. Faggot, we're ready to start our meeting again. All right, thank you, everybody. We're ready to resume our meeting.
Okay, one last point that I want to make on the annual report, which others will be able to see once it's made public, but Director Choi, you referenced kind of how extensive it is. And I think what hopefully comes out in the annual report is that this work is really the work of the organization. And so, like when we look at professional learning, we have done very specific work to ensure that equity is integrated throughout our professional learning. And so, there was a point in time where kind of what we would consider equity to be just driven, professional learning just driven just from our equity and family engagement department. And while that is still true and that department leads a lot of really important work, it is also all of our work to carry this forward. So hopefully that comes out in the report. All right, 14.7. So we already talked about a lot of the data that's here in 14.7, which is ensure a highly qualified and diverse workforce through strategic recruitment, hiring, retention. So we look at staff reporting levels of satisfaction. We look at hiring numbers, retention numbers, and that we have a plan to recruit, hire, and retain diverse staff. We're saying that's in compliance with exceptions noted. So the district has developed a recruitment and retention plan to accelerate and improve these efforts. Our human resources department is also evaluating ways which we can better analyze our talent acquisition pipeline to identify areas of improvement in hiring. As previously mentioned, we are in an interesting place as an organization where we're not growing, and so while we'll continue to need to hire, because we will continue to have folks that retire and we'll have some replacement, our recruitment and retention will look different than it had when we were in a time of accelerated growth. All right, so it looks like I chose not to just reference the report, the data that was in the monitor report for this. Are there any questions from the board on 14.7?
Director Stewart?
Could you share with us the changes as far as diversity of workforce?
Yeah, so overall, in tables 26 shows the change in percentage of all hires to new position categories. So I'll just reference that back in 2018-19, 74.6% of new hires at that time identified as white, as compared to 22-23, that was 64.3% of new hires identified as white. And so we have seen increases of staff that identify as Asian, moving from 13.3% of new hires to 19.6% of new hires. Hispanic Latino from 6.5% to 9.5%, and two or more races, most notably 2.8 to 4.7%. And then those are also broken down in the subsequent tables, 27, 28, 29.
I just thought it was helpful for the audience to make sure they heard those numbers too, rather than just the headline.
Okay. All right, 14.8, ensuring that all staff receive ongoing professional development to learn and put into practice equity, diversity, inclusion, cultural responsiveness, and anti-racism to increase awareness of personal bias and recognize systemic bias and inequities. This perhaps explains why the list of professional learning that was offered was fairly comprehensive. So we have the annual report indicating components for district-sponsored professional learning consistent with this policy. We also have an indicator demonstrating compliance with state-required equity and social-emotional learning training. We are saying that we are in compliance for this area. So this is the first year that we've published a report regarding professional learning, and we continue to develop professional learning consistent with state expectations and monitoring completion of that learning. So again, there's the annual report highlights that. We also, in the monitor report, reference a table 30 that indicates the professional learning that was delivered consistent with state expectations for equity and social emotional learning.
Director Guthrie.
Sorry, this is a little on, what are we on now, 14.8, and also a little on 14.6. One of the things I really love to see, sorry, it went down there. One of the things I really love to see in the annual report was the broad lens of what equity means. Just, yes, to Director Choi's point, there's a lot and very different in terms of the different groups that were targeted or that professional development was on in terms of reaching different student groups. One thing I did notice on the student affinity groups was that, again, it was really focused on race and ethnicity. And I was wondering, specifically, I'm curious in the area of disability, and if that's something where we've thought about how we build student leaders around that identity, because it really is an identity.
Yeah, a great question, and I'd say that there has been, as we've thought about inclusive practices and supporting our students with disabilities, at the secondary level, there's been a kind of a number of different forays into that has largely been kind of the school-directed basis. And so there'll be some efforts over the next couple of years that will look to better understand what do inclusive practices look like at the secondary level, which is where we typically see a lot of those student interest groups, and so what types of supports are necessary to help those have in place. So, yes.
Any other questions?
All right, 14. Okay. 14.9, incorporating diverse perspectives, culturally relevant strategies in district school communications, community engagement, especially perspectives that have been marginalized, underrepresented, or have faced barriers. So we have a number of indicators here. Families report they understand district communication, positive responses through perception survey regarding access to district communication. We maintain communication tools and processes to support families engage in preferred language and allow for processes that allow for engagement and input into decision making. So for those first indicators, these are areas where these are new indicators where we need to identify ways in which to collect that data, so that's not data that's available from this past year. For maintaining communications tools, the district last year was the full year in which we had implemented Parent Square. One of the really cool things about that implementation, so we went out with an RFP for a new communication tool, and one of the things that we actually had heard from parent community groups and advocates was the importance of having the ability to use text messaging to be able to reach families, and the importance of the ability to have that be able to send and receive in family's native language. So when we went out with that RFP for tools, those were central parts of what we were looking for. And so when we identified Parent Square, that was one of the key values, and actually was something that they had developed and only delivered to one other district that we were aware of, and so we were the second to have that capability because it was critically important for us to be able to connect with our families. And so really excited that we were able to have that tool, which would allow our staff to connect with families in the manner in which that worked best for them, and allows to have control, allows to have conversations in native language. So that was an exciting step last year to really be able to roll that out. And so we're indicating that we're in compliance. The other thing that I'll note, and then we probably need to continue to work on how we more systemically engage in this data, but our schools are expected to have building equity teams, and part of the theory of action kind of behind that is one is that we want school leaders with their school community engaging in intentional conversations around equity and inclusion, and so kind of calling that out is important. And we want to ensure that parents are part of those conversations. And so those being expectations, we ask schools to just report back kind of like how is that, what does that parent engagement look like? And so sharing just, and these represent 3 of our schools and their experience, but the board can see that for our schools, and we've been, working on having equity teams play a meaningful role in our schools, and so reflecting back from our schools that those teams are beginning to be viewed as integral parts of their experience, and I think when I look at these quotes, I also think back to Dr. Holman's comment that this is an aspirational policy, and I think that these are aspirational experiences that we'll continue to work to be ones that are reflected throughout the organization. Are there any questions on 14.9? I think that's where we're at.
Any questions or comments?
All right, 1410, this was another area that the board engaged in some really robust conversation and made some changes to the policy last spring. And the revision indicates that we're going to provide culturally responsive restorative methods to address concerns, grievances, or violations of this policy, particularly related to racist or other discriminatory actions. And I believe that the board has a recognition that we do have students families and staff who will sometimes experience harm in our school system. And so how do we address those concerns or those experiences when that occurs? So one of our indicators is to ensure that we're continually looking at our policies to ensure that they're appropriate in responding. But the other is looking at, can we provide evidence of culturally responsive and restorative practices being applied in working with students and families to resolve concerns or grievances? We wrestled a little bit with how best do we show this, in part because not wanting to betray the trust or the experience of students or families who have experienced harm, and wanting to be really sensitive to their stories, and yet at the same time present back to the board that there's action that's being taken in the spirit of this policy and consistent with the values. So the board has received some information around those experiences, and you actually heard tonight from a couple of our equity and family engagement facilitators who are critical parts of helping ensure that these practices are in place. And so boards received a brief highlighting some of the different approaches. I'll talk briefly about some of those. And I'll just say we are doing things differently. We are think about like when student discipline, we are more likely to engage and outside support around restorative circles than we are to engage in outside support for a disciplinary hearing. And that reflects a change in practice that really looks at both thinking about how do we address an incident, but also then how are we reflective on the impact within the system and how we need to continue to change and adapt to have places that are culturally responsive and restorative. So we've been in a process, and I believe we've already had Director Foos, who's Director of Student Services, has presented a little bit on restorative practices, but we continue to provide training and support for our schools around active listening, thinking about open and honest communication, collaborative problem solving, empathetic understanding, and collective responsibility. And what that looks like in action, or the application, is that we've been in the process of training facilitators. So those are staff within our student services or our equity and family engagement department have received training to be able to effectively help facilitate restorative conversations, supporting schools in an empathetic response. We have engaged in racial healing circles within our schools. We also have, at times, will bring in outside individuals who are known as circle keepers. Sometimes particularly in time incidents where trust may be particularly low, and that it would be beneficial for both parties to have somebody with a high level of expertise who's also kind of really independent of the situation. And then we have started to track data related to restorative chats or conferences, and have seen a pretty significant year-over-year increase as in restorative chats and conferences. That's not data set that we are currently applying towards this policy, but it gives us some indication that there's an uptick in application of restorative practices within our schools. Any questions on 1410?
I hate to do this, but can we go back to 14.9? I do have one question. So I understand that the goal is for us to have equity teams at all of our schools and that we want parents to be involved. I'm just guessing that compliance varies from location to location. So I'm curious, how are we ensuring compliance or also gauging effectiveness of equity teams? And then do we have supports for schools that might need it?
I can answer a couple of parts of that question. So our Equity and Family Engagement department does engage with schools around, and they actually develop professional learning modules for equity and family engagement, for equity team, building equity teams to engage in. And so, and we essentially roster who's on teams. And so, so we have an understanding of essentially that schools have building equity teams and who's on those teams because we're providing training to them. With respect to the efficacy of those teams, we don't have we haven't developed a fidelity measurement tool to look at those. We do use a fidelity inventory assessment with respect to MTSS. It does ask has some indicators relative to parent engagement and teams that we could look at. So we essentially monitor, we use the FIA, that's the acronym for it, to look at that as a component. It's not specific to equity teams. So we could look at that to see if that would be, would provide us with enough kind of a sense of fidelity, or whether we would need to develop our own.
Director Guthrie.
Sorry, since you went back to 14, I'm lost now. What are we on? Went back to 14.9. I'm also curious about if there's student engagement on any of those teams, especially at the secondary level?
Yeah, I think we've talked about at the high school level students, but I don't know that we haven't instituted as a requirement, have we? Okay, so we've encouraged, and I believe we have schools that do have students on. Okay, so we have that. That is not a standard expectation or practice, but it does exist as a practice in some schools.
Well, yeah, I'm curious because I have had the opportunity to participate on two of my school's equity teams, two different schools, and it's been a really valuable experience. So I definitely think that's a fantastic avenue for community engagement, and really love to hear that's happening and that the teams are getting the support they need.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Should I go to 1411, or do we have questions on 1410? 1411. Okay. So the final area of the policy was to develop and maintain a culturally responsive system to analyze and allocate fiscal and human resources, to eliminate inequities and promote student success. Our indicators are evidence of documented clear budget process, clear relevant culture responsive communication engagement, and demonstrated use of an equity analysis tool. We're noting in compliance with exceptions noted. And so some of the kind of key takeaways is that we have a clear budget process and have been working, have done last year and will continue to work on making more information accessible on the webpage, and the webpage is translatable. Last year in the development of the budget, decisions focused the resource allocation related to equity, inclusion, and MTSS. All right, so the report is being presented as in compliance with noted exceptions.
Any questions on 1411?
Do we want a motion and then discussion? Is that? Yes. Okay. What's that?
Nothing. Continue.
I don't mean to short circuit anything.
No,
Okay.
you're fine.
Okay.
I'm ready to entertain a motion.
Okay. I move approval of the monitoring report as presented, which is the monitoring report for OE14 as presented, which is in compliance with the exceptions that are noted in the report.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Director Liberty and seconded by Director Guthrie that the board approves the monitoring report as having made reasonable progress with noted exceptions.
Sure.
In compliance.
That's what I said. Yeah.
Sorry, in compliance with noted exceptions. Is there any further discussion? Director Liberty?
First thing I want to say is I really appreciate the presentation tonight. I can tell that a lot of work went into it. And I think, in particular, I appreciate I can't remember what you titled it, but it was sort of a summary for each one. You know, these are, what were the terms you used? Celebrations and areas for improvement, consideration, growth. And I think when I think about, what we committed with this policy, part of that was transparency to the public. And I think transparency requires that what we present be understandable and relevant and probative, right? We're not just saying, oh, here's this data dump, go make, here, it's in there somewhere. So I know I really appreciate that. I think it's helpful for the board. The reports are great. The presentation is helpful for the board too, but I think it's particularly helpful for the community to see the work that's going on, the celebrations, the areas of focus. I think it's really important in particular as policy. So I appreciate what I can tell was a large amount of time that went into preparing for this.
Director Stewart.
I also like to thank you for, last week we had presentations to us of this report, 2 directors at a time, 1 director at a time, whatever, and it gave us the opportunity to ask our questions at that point. And I appreciate the fact that you reflected the answers to our questions in tonight's presentation. And so for those of you who thought we ought to be asking more questions, our questions were answered during the week. Thank you.
Director Guthrie.
Yeah, and I'd also like to say thank you. It's been a lot to digest, just to consume this, and so I can only imagine the amount of work that went into this. But it's really appreciated. I went back to last year's report to understand sort of what the conversations were there, and I mean, like almost the entire report was can't read. And now, just to be able to have some of this data that we've never seen before, that we've never even really been able to talk about before. Yeah, thank you. It's very, very much appreciated, and exciting to see the progress too.
Awesome. Okay. Any other further discussion?
Yes, and I think Director Gillingham, or Deputy Superintendent Gillingham, sorry, highlighted this at one point in his presentation. But there are for some of these, particularly for survey data for staff. I'm trying to find the table in particular, but there are some where so many of the subgroups have suppressed data, and so I appreciate the thinking of already like how can we, appreciating the need to suppress that. How can we aggregate some of this in a way that's still meaningful, but useful. So I'd like us to think about that for next year, because I think otherwise it'll just continue likely for quite a long time to be suppressed. Okay.
Anything else? Okay. Hearing no further discussion, we will proceed to vote on the motion. It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Guthrie that the board approve the monitoring report as in compliance with noted exceptions. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The board would like to commend the superintendent and his team on the work that's being done to ensure that we can monitor this policy. We really appreciate all the work, all the effort that's been done to gather the data, be creative with new data that we've never seen before. It's clearly shows the work that's gone into it, and it's of such utmost importance. We really appreciate it.
Well, and can I just comment, the board did spend almost a year and a half developing this policy, and the hope was that this policy would help lead the district in a different direction, in a new direction that truly infused the work of equity into everything that we're doing. And it's impressive for me to see, like, that annual report. I've never seen anything like that before. And so for us to produce that as an organization to share with the board, yes, but also the public, so they know the work that's going into this. That's what our families were asking for, so that they could ask informed questions around the work that's going on. So I appreciate the work that's going on with staff as well.
Thank you. The next items on our agenda are proposed updates to the policy and reasonable interpretation and indicators for OE12 facilities and OE13 technology. Dr. Holman, if you could begin with OE12.
Yes, and I will just walk through the grid that was provided for the board. All of these changes were discussed last year as we went through the process. The proposal is to update these components, and then the board will actually see these in monitoring in the coming month, I believe it is. And so that's not our typical timeline for updating these things and turning around to monitor. Typically, updating something that you're being held accountable to, usually it's a year out. But these were things we discussed, and so that's why they're here. And so there are updates to indicators, some just wording changes. You can see the second indicator here really is around reflection of sustainability practices. The third indicator in 12.3 is focusing on safety and cleanliness, because there really had been an absence of reference to safety and cleanliness in our reporting. Update to the interpretation in 12.4 with a subsequent indicator that got adjusted and moved. Policy, interpretation, and indicator. Let me see if I can find that. Yep, there it is. The update there, you can see on the far right, remove as it is included in 12.4, and so that we're not double reporting on things. And then in 12.7, again, we had double reporting, and so trying to clean up the report. And then in 12.8, clarifying that new indicators are for new, replacement, or school addition projects. So just, again, being clear around what we're measuring in the policy or in the monitoring report. And then sections will be renumbered to reflect the removal of 12.5 and 12.7. And so the board received this, I believe, last week on Thursday, or 2 weeks. Okay. So happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or points of clarification? Director Lula.
On 12.1, if you could scroll up. The way that will be reported is it will be reported, it's yes or no, right? Is that I'm just wondering how that indicator will be reported to the board.
On the second indicator there?
12.1, district facilities operate in consideration of resources, efficiency, and I won't read the whole thing.
So there will be a little bit more data besides yes and no around that, yes.
Can you give me a sense of what that will be?
So I'm going to ask my team if they know that, and otherwise I would need to follow up.
That's fine.
Barbara, on 12.1 here, it states district facilities operate in consideration of resource efficiency and sustainable practices while balancing critical needs of indoor air quality, thermal comfort, and mechanical system functionality. So the question is, how will this be reported in terms of monitoring? Are there data associated with this, or is there a statement of compliance that would be reported?
I'm going to have to ask Brian Buck on the specifics. If it's going to be both, it could be both data and a statement of compliance. So I will find out.
And do you have an idea of what type of data it could be? So
I
let
need
me,
to find
let me
out.
offer
So-
something it could be. So we have systems that
Mhm.
actually monitor all of our classroom spaces
Right.
for thermal comfort.
Mhm.
And if there's a report of, it's too cold in my classroom,
Right.
then we have a centralized system that they can actually, look to see, is there something going on? Is it a mechanical? So they've centralized those across the district so that it isn't, a report, someone drives out to address the problem. So as we think about sustainable practices, being able to centralize and, look into what's occurring centrally provides us quicker response, better ability to diagnose, and then if we need to, then get people on site to provide support. So I think those are the types of pieces of evidence that would be provided, as opposed to 80% of classrooms were at X degrees, or
Okay, and that's what I thought, and that is fine with me. I just figured I should know before I approve it.
Any other questions or points of clarification? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Holland, for the overview. I will now entertain a motion to approve the updates to the policy and reasonable interpretation and indicators for OE12 facilities as presented.
Move approval.
Second.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Stewart that the board approve the updates to the policy and reasonable interpretation and indicators for OE12. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, hearing none, the motion carries. Dr. Holman, could you present an overview of OE13 technology?
Similar updates again that we discussed through the monitoring process last year. You can see under 13.1 just a very small update to the interpretation where it states services and integration. Indicator for 13.1, it adjusts, it removes the year just so it's referencing the 5-year technology plan. 13.2 modified the language around community and adjusted that to family and caretakers. 13.3 we added department because that's another one of our inclusive of departments to recognize their role in users of data. And that's the updates for 13.
Thank you. Any questions or clarifications on those updates? Okay. I will now entertain a motion to approve the updates to the policy and reasonable interpretation and indicators for OE13 technology as presented.
Motion to approve.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Guthrie and seconded by Director LaLiberty that the board approve the updates to the policy and reasonable interpretation and indicators for OE13 technology as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed, hearing none, the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the board summary for monitoring results 3. I'd like to thank Director LaLiberty for writing the board summary for R3 based on our discussion at the September 11th board meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve the board summary.
Well, I thank you, Director Choi. Director Bleasner has has indicated she has some proposed edits that she would like to make to the board summary. She's not here tonight, and I don't think anyone else has seen the edits yet. So I move that we table approval of the board summary for results 3 to our next meeting in October, and we will, in advance of that, there may be a revised version in the board packet in advance of that meeting.
Second.
There's a motion to table the approval of the monitoring and report for results 3 until our next,
October 23.
until October 23 at our next board meeting, following some edits to the board summary.
Maybe.
Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we will proceed to a vote on the motion. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed, hearing none, the motion carries. The next item is the superintendent report. Dr. Holman.
Thank you. So among a number of things, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I bring this to the board because this is of utmost importance for an organization that has responsibility for our technology infrastructure, for student and staff data, the protection and privacy of youth online. There's different rules in place for various ages of students, and so our work around cybersecurity is we take it seriously, and it's an everyday activity and action. I asked our Executive Director of Technology Services just for an update because I know he and his team are working diligently, specifically around this month as it's part of our promotion. And he says it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and the LWSD Technology Services team is actively working on promotional materials and training to remind staff and students why cybersecurity is important and what each of us can do to support a safe and secure digital environment. In addition, we continue to manage strong passwords and multi-factor authentication on accounts as preventative measures, as well as improving the process for dynamic software updates to applications and data security on devices to reduce vulnerabilities. Technology Services also partners with outside state and federal agencies like Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I think we know that is CISA. I'll go with that. For proactive network intrusion testing, system vulnerability scanning, and monitoring reports on the latest potential threat vectors. Please don't ask me what a vector is. All in all, efforts to stay take appropriate preventative action to secure our district's digital resources. One of the things we did as a district last year through the budget process, you may recall, we actually took a project manager in Technology Services and reallocated that to a cybersecurity professional. And so Javier started 2 months ago or so. He actually is returning to Lake Washington School District in our Technology Services. He was excited to come back, but now we have someone whose full-time job is just working on the security of our network. There is a tremendous amount of information out about school districts and maintaining a safe environment. Schoolsafety.gov has a tremendous amount of information and resources, and I just grabbed this snippet. The number of attacks on schools has been increasing dramatically over time, and government profiles. I mean, just it all has become a target of those that would like to do harm by stealing our data, making us pay for our data through a variety of different manners. And so our work is tremendous. These are 2 slides that we shared with our district leadership team a few years back during October. But cybersecurity really is the effort to protect our systems, and cyber safety are fundamental practices. We know that the biggest vulnerabilities in any system are the humans that are using it. And so during October, that's why we talk about it, we share with staff all of these pieces. Last year during a presentation, Forrest, our Executive Director of Technology Services, shared kind of a cybersecurity efforts and all of the various components that, some of the components that go into our infrastructure, that are in place. Our partnership with Microsoft has been instrumental in the development of our systems to maintain our overall safety and support. This is from 2018, but this data always kind of is surprising to me, and I'm sure it's changed since 2018. But the fact that the United States had over 85% of the cyber attacks worldwide, that is tremendous. And then there's another layer of data as to how many of those are government infrastructure, and then under that, school districts. One of the things that we have done, I think, 3 times as a system, is we have done phishing exercises with our staff. Last year, we emailed staff and said, cybersecurity is important. Here's the process. You're going to get an email that's not a real email. It's going to ask you to provide credentials. Like, we go through the process, because it's not that we're trying to catch people. What we're trying to do is to teach people that you always have to be aware. And so those are exercises that we have done in the past and will continue to do. Phishing, we know, is one of the key ways that individuals gain access to our systems, because what a phish does is it's an email that is sent, asks the receiver to click on a link and provide some sort of protected information, a username, a password, a social security number, that type of information, so that then that information can be taken and monetized. And so we'll continue to do those efforts and partner with our staff, whom this isn't the first thing they think about. They're thinking about kids and teaching and well-being and all of those things, and they're our partners in ensuring that our infrastructure is safe. And so on the launch of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, I thought we would bring it to light here in the board meeting as well. So we'll continue that work.
Thank you, Dr. Holman.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is Public and Community Affairs. This portion of the business meeting of the board is an opportunity for any board members to inform and provide updates from organizations or groups they engage with on behalf of Lake Washington School District. Director Bleesner was our voting representative for Wausau General Assembly this year. She provided me with a written update over everything that kind of happened during that time, and she's not here to give her own summary. I was going to go ahead and have Dr. Holman put this on board docs, and the rest of the board can read her update. I would offer to read it now, but it's 10 o'clock. So please go ahead and take the time to read that update. Director Stewart, as legislative rep, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, a couple of things. One, we were scheduled to have a meeting with Congressperson Schreier this coming week. Due to the political gymnastics that went on over the weekend, over the shutting down of the government, the recess that the Congresspeople were going to enjoy this week dissolved. So we will have to reschedule that, I'm told. Also, the Eastside Human Services Forum is, one, knowing the beginning stages of their strategic plan, but two, they are searching for a new executive director, a part-time position. So be on the watch for that if you're interested in something along those lines.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything for Public and Community Affairs? Director LaLiberty.
I attended the quarterly coordination meeting with the City of Kirkland, along with Dr. Holman and Barbara, and I think Brian was there. Well, I had to drop off for the last few minutes of it, John, so I may ask you to fill in the last few minutes. Okay, it's a memory test for you. I have the agenda in front of me, so I'll at least tell you it was on it. The agenda items that were covered included the city's, I don't know if everyone is aware of this, the City of Kirkland has acquired Houghton Village, which is, for those who know Kirkland, that's where the PCC was situated. just what direction is that? East of Lakeview Elementary. And they are committed and remain interested in partnering with the school district and other like organizations in terms of what's going in there. Also discussed the park ballot measure that the city of Kirkland has right now, which would include, if it were passed, funds for additional aquatics offerings. The city of Kirkland is in the process of revising its comprehensive plan right now. I actually worked on the last revision to it 10 years ago. And as part of that, they have reached out to us to talk about what changes we would like to see for future school property usage. And I understand we're coordinating with them on that. Let's see here. We also discussed transportation benefit district the city has, which is funded with car tabs, additional car tab fees. Part of what they're using those funds for, I believe, Dr. Holman, correct me if I am misremembering here, is additional safe routes to school, walkways, and funding that, which has a direct benefit for our students and our families. And then we spent a fair amount of time discussing the recently installed school safety traffic cameras. I know that there are at least 2, I think 3 on Finn Hill. I have so far complied with on my way there and back, to my knowledge. And they've unfortunately they have caught a fair number of Kurt reported they have caught a fair number of speeders so far, but I think over time the idea is that we'll reduce speeding during school times. Okay, and then we discussed the construction that we have going on our projects in Kirkland, including Finn Hill Middle School and Kirkland Middle School. We discussed both the city and the district discussed the community resource officer program, and then the part I missed, John, is the Raven Way street name dedication.
Thank you for handing it off at that point.
Yeah.
A group of Juanita High School students approached the city requesting to name the entry street into Juanita Raven or Raven's Way. And so they handed it over to us because there's policy implications. And so my follow-up is to review the policy, talk to our administrative team and probably the students that brought it forward to understand their interests. It wouldn't be dissimilar to maybe Wolfpack Way at Eastlake. I know Eastside Catholic has Crusader Way, so it wouldn't be the first time a street was named. So the students went to the city thinking naming of a street would be a city business, and the city said, well, it's not our property, but we'd be happy to partner with the district if they want to. So going through that.
Okay, and that was the agenda for the quarterly coordination meeting. I always appreciate attending these meetings and the city's continued partnership with us.
Thank you very much for that update. Anybody else? Director Guthrie.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go to my first elementary literacy adoption meeting. So thank you to Kelly Pease, all the teachers who welcomed me in as an interloper. Yeah, so we started with some shared reflection and shared learning. At this meeting, the focus of the shared learning was around, and I may get the technical terminology wrong here, but the WIDA language acquisition progression, which is really targeted at multilingual learners. And we were talking about how it relates to reading. What I thought was really cool was that a lot of the teachers made the connection. I heard a lot of comments of, wow, this really applies to all kids. And so really reinforcing those inclusive practices of, yes, this is something that we're talking about for multilingual learners, but it's really just best practices and different ways of thinking about how I teach all of my students. So yeah, at the end of the day, there was some brainstorming around sort of the features that the teachers desired to see in a potential elementary literacy curriculum. there was a really universally strong commitment. It really was not up for debate that we're looking for a curriculum that's grounded in the science of reading, and that is really with structured literacy first and foremost. So that was really great to hear. Really lines up with the board's policies around the instructional practices, or I'm missing the word here, and also results too. So that's really, I think, fundamentally what this group, that's the main policy connection there, is really focused on that. The third grade reading is what we're really targeting, and hoping, looking to over the next 2-ish years, adopt a curriculum that will result in progress there.
Awesome, thank you. Would you also like to share an AI update?
Sure. So, and probably some of this I'm assuming will be in Director Bleasner's WASDA update. But I know we had some debate last meeting about WASDA had a proposed policy position on generative AI, which I had some opinions on. And Director Bleasner and I worked on a revised position or an amended position. Dr. Holman reviewed that as well, and Caitlin Cox just providing some great feedback. So something that Director Bleasner could bring to WASDA, and parts of it were accepted, or that's part of the position that. My favorite part made it in, so I'm happy. It was a good lesson in compromise for a new board member. I did not get 100% of what I wanted, but I think some of the key pieces were there. Also, there was the Senate Help Committee, which stands for Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. They had a white paper that they put out. It's publicly available early September. Sort of looking at generative AI in the context of those areas. And they were looking for feedback, maybe on the whole document, but definitely in education. They had some key questions that they were looking to get feedback really from the whole United States, I guess, on. Because this is the U.S. Senate Help Committee. So I gave them, I think, 4 pages of thoughts around that. And yeah, there's been some continued follow-up as well. I've shared that with Caitlin, and I know she had some conversations with Senator Wellman, I think earlier or last week. Gosh, they're all blending together. So yeah, just some work in that area, sort of at the broader level, but looking forward also to how that starts to play out here in Lake Washington.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your work on that. Dr. Holman.
Yeah, so as part of our post-session meetings with our delegation last year, Senator Wellman asked for a couple of specific follow-up discussions. She met Caitlin Cox, orchestrated Senator Wellman coming on site, and Senator Wellman said she hadn't been here in person for, she thought, 4 years. And just with COVID and things like that. So she was really kind of glad to be back in person and talking. She first met with Dr. Shannon Hitch. She had some questions around isolation and restraint laws, and then that morphed into an hour-and-a-half conversation around special education. And so really glad that Senator Wellman had the opportunity just to have those conversations around just what does it look like implementing special education rules in a school district. She had asked me for follow-up around, I'll just call it the principals bill. The Association for Washington School Principals brought some legislation proposals forward last year. 2 of those actually moved forward. One was passed, one was not. And we just talked about, where that came from, how it's interpreted, how does it support principals. I offered if she wants to write a principal support bill, Lake Washington School District would be more than happy to partner with that, because we know our principals are the crux of implementation. So all of the work that we want to get done in schools, our leaders are the ones that actually help actualize that in our schools. And so ensuring that proper supports are in place for them are important. And so definitely offered to give my 2 cents around what could support principals. And so, again, good discussion. And I concluded, I said I have 2 quick things. One, we need simple majority. I said, so if you could make that happen this session, that would be appreciated. And second thing, invited her for inclusionary practices site visits. So.
Awesome, thank you. If nobody has anything else for public and community affairs, we can move on to school visits. Our first board school visit is going to take place on October 24th, so I would encourage any and all board members who are available to make sure you get that on the calendar. It is a date change, so please make sure to let Teresa know if you are available to attend.
Do we have a
that school
location or
visit.
school selected yet?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you.
And then, as we haven't had any school visits, I'm going to move on to our next update section, which is our committee updates. And no, you're fine. Director Guthrie has already shared her committee update. Has anybody else started any of their committees yet? I have not. Director Liberty? Oh, yeah, you can talk about the Sustainability Policy Committee update. Thank you.
Okay, 2 things to report on this. One, everyone else on the board is aware of, and that is that. So I'll start with that. We are 2 of our student reps, Shivani and Taran, led 2 linkages with different groups of students. So those are open conversations to hear and learn from students about what they think on sustainability and on the board's sustainability policy. They were extraordinary. Both the work by our student reps and the sessions themselves. And so that was I believe that was last Tuesdays when that occurred. And I believe, I don't mean to assign them work, but I believe they are drafting a report of that will be, is that right? Okay, that's great. That will be provided to the board. In addition, we had a sustainability policy committee meeting that followed either the day after, 2 days after that. So a lot of that was brought into the room when we had our policy committee working meeting. The committee reviewed an initial draft of policy language and of a preamble for it, a sort of signing statement. And there's feedback, there's work ongoing. I think we're narrowing in on a policy an initial policy that will then go out to the community for additional feedback, I think, in the next few weeks, probably. The next Sustainability Policy Committee meeting is October 20, hold on, calendar. It is relatively soon. And there will be more to report then, and I'm anticipating after that meeting we'll be, I think the expectation is that there will be a draft policy ready to share. The next meeting is on October 10, so soon thereafter. I think we'll have a draft policy that will be shared. So really exciting work, really appreciate in particular our students' involvement, and we have 2 community members on the committee who are taking time out of their day to provide really, really great feedback.
Awesome, thank you. The board will plan to meet at our next study session on October 23rd at 5 p.m., followed by a board meeting at 7. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the October 2nd, 2023 board meeting. Nobody wants to leave. Anybody going to move?
I said we were going to be done at 11:03, so I got 45 minutes to go.
It has been moved by Director Guthrie and seconded by Director Stewart that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, hearing none, motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 10:15 p.m. Thank you.